number 11 of the 6th edition Manual of Procedure for National Tuberculosis Program is about recording and reporting. Recording and reporting are important in the implementation of a successful TB program. Availability of records allows provision of appropriate and effective care for patients. Through complete and accurate recording, health workers can monitor that each presumptive TB is examined and each TB is treated and cured. Records, therefore, should contain up-to-date information on patients' diagnosis, treatment, follow-up examination, and outcome, and post-treatment follow-up. Aside from information on the patient's care, reports also provide information on program efficiency and effectiveness, including availability of drugs and other supplies at the health level. So this section discusses general guidelines on recording and reporting, including utilization of the Integrated TB Information System, or what we know as the ITIS, and then procedures on records and data management, and general description of official entity recording forms. The detailed instructions on accomplishing the forms will also be discussed during this lecture. The objective of this module is to ensure the provision of appropriate and effective care for patients through standardized recording, and also to monitor program efficiency and effectiveness through streamlined reporting. As an overview, this would be in alignment with the field step 1 in DOH and donors indicators. So, ano-ano ba yung mga alignment na ito in this new module, in the new MOP? So, in this MOP module, all indicators are still included but needs updating. No? For example, all forms is the addition of drug-susceptible TB, drug-resistant TB, and the duplication of mandatory TB notification. In the new indicator, kasali na po yung contact tracing, meron din pong LPA testing. Okay. So in the old indicator, TB treatment coverage and case notification merge DS and DRTB, and then there's also community contribution and private sector contribution. Also, the LTI coverage, and then there's also population testing rate na po ang DSSM and expert, no stock out, identify indicator drugs and supplies, also as well as RDT testing and DSP coverage, and then RRTB enrollment cohorting. So that was in the old indicator. So in the indicators, it includes diabetes mellitus and persons deprived of liberty screened for TB. Mayroon na pong ICF report in the new MOP. And then there's also contact investigation coverage. There's also screen by chest x-ray. There's also field health reported patients, CCT families, ADSM submission, incidents among healthcare workers, and new TB drug treatment coverage. So that's the new indicators in our latest edition of MOP. And then there's also integration. So there was a merging and the harmonization of recording forms. For example, hospital referral logbook, na-dissolve na po siya into just the TB master list. And then harmonization of formats and legends across all recording forms, for example, sex, surname, the attendance monitoring. And then harmonization with IPs, for example, yung source of patient, subtype, reason of outcome, and then we also have user feedback, and also the compliance to the TB law, which is a mandatory notification, specifically on mandatory notification of all diagnosed cases, and Data Privacy Act of 2021, and example, the privacy policies included in Form 4, notification and treatment card, and also the ISO requirements. Let's say, example, when under the user's feedback, there's an improved layout and spacing, and there's clarification on labels and legend. Um, if the facility has their own policy, the NTP staff must follow the stricter guidelines in terms of recording and reporting, because nationally we have legislations um, into the recording and reporting, and then the Data Privacy Act po. So for the data life cycle, from the creation of the data, and later on, this data will be stored, then to be used, and from sharing, archiving, and and then after some time, i-destroy na po ang data. So later on, this data life cycle will be discussed as we progress in the lecture. As a general guidelines and procedures in recording and reporting, so we will discuss one by one ano po yung mga policies and procedures that will be implemented in this new edition of Manual of Procedure for TB. So number one, patient data shall be collected, analyzed, and utilized to ensure provision of quality and adequate services, because we want that we are providing equality and improved health services to our clients. Number two, NTP recording and reporting shall be implemented in all health facilities providing to this in terms of screening, testing, diagnosing, treatment, and or prevention, whether public or private. So, lahat po nung nagpo-provide ng TV services should implement the recording and reporting, whether they are DOTS providing or DOTS referring facilities, or those only implementing TV. Okay. On policies on recording and reporting, letter A, request inclusion of new health facilities with TV services in the TV facilities database of ITRIS through clinics, courtesy copy to the regional ITS administrator. All registered health facilities sign a NTP facility code. So, ito po for new health facilities providing TV services, kailangan po sila ma-include sa directory natin sa ITs. So the request of service request form should be submitted to the regional ITs administrator. So you have to email your request to the official email addresses of the Department of Health, NTP program, and also the ITs administration for the region. Every facility, health facility, are assigned with facility code. Okay? So, NTP website, ito po, http://ntp.gov ntpdoh.gov.ph/facility_directory.php. IT's directory all have all that we be provided. So for those of you who are familiar with this, I believe nakita niyo na po itong portion sa ating IT's yung directory portion. We request inclusion of new health workers in the TV care providers database of ITs through the regional ITs later. So, among those included in the database, identify who will be giving access to IT. Kasi not all po will be given access. Yun lang po may um, direct, um, direct handling, those only directly handling the patient, no, patient, sila lang po yung bibigyan ng access sa IPs. So, to ensure also data. So, and request for user account through accomplishment of field service request. Kung ito po yung tinawag ng ating mga IPs, project associate na SRF. Authorized health workers include but not limited to the health facility. So, sino-sino to sila yung facility head, nurse or nurses, designated encoders, and coordinators at different levels, and notifying physician. Sila lang po yung pwedeng bigyan na access sa TB data. Sila lang po yung pwedeng bigyan ng IPS accounts po. Okay, letter C, obtain recording forms from the CHD through the PHO-CHO. So usually, the entity recording forms are provided by the regional offices and then downloaded to the provincial health offices or city health offices. So the RHUs will be requesting their forms in respective PHOs or CHOs because the DOH recording forms as well as mga logistics for the program. Policy number 3, recording and reporting shall include all active diagnosed TB cases as per RA 10767. Ito na po yung tatawag natin TB law. And all latent TB cases classified according to internationally accepted case definitions. Also, healthcare workers shall be capacitated in accomplishing entity recording forms and reporting. Okay, through the attendance in meetings or coaching by a senior trained staff. So, this training, the MT training, ang participants of this training are the entity core team. So, some of the RHUs have included their midwives and other staff. So, for those facilities who were not able to include their other health staff like the midwives or medtechs or those partners for the TB implementation, you can do a one-on-one coaching sa mga staff na hindi po naka-join sa ating training. How do we record? So, we use appropriate ink color for paper record. So, we use red ink for positive laboratory request. No? So, when we record the lab results of the patient, wala pa rin pong pagbabago from the old to the new MOP, we still use the red ink. So, kung nag-positive for Gene Expert or DSSM or TB culture results or any resistance to drugs such as LPA and DST results, we still use the red ink. And then we use black ink for all other records not mentioned above. Details, ano ba yung category ng patient, ano yung outcome ng patient. So any other patient information not mentioned above, black ink po yung gagamitin natin. The physician or immediate supervisor is responsible in ensuring accuracy and consistency of data record. Usually, ang head of the facility, na assistant niya po, usually the nurses, sila po yung responsible for accuracy and consistency of records and reports. So, in other RHUs, naman po yung kanilang designate personnel. So, it varies po, depende po sa facility structure. For good recording practices. Ano ba itong mga good record? Corrections in paper records, strike through wrong or outdated information, and correct and updated or update the data. And then countersign. So we just we just slash the wrong data and then write the correct information and then we countersign doon sa may correction with the initial of the staff and the date when the correction was made. We don't use anymore, hindi na po tayo nag-whiteout ngayon. It is being discouraged. No? Dapat yung correct way of doing correction is just slash the wrong entry and then countersign po and then just record the correct or updated data. For electronic records naman, the audit trail reflects corrections made. So sa IPs, meron siyang audit trails for every corrections made. Okay? So when do we update the records? Ideally, or it is being recommended that records should be updated daily. But sometimes, depende sa workload ng staff in charge, sometimes ang nangyayari in actual, records are being updated on a weekly basis. Some of them nangyayari is quarterly, but it is really highly encouraged that records are updated daily to avoid na tumambak yung data o yung information kailangan i-update. And then ensure new forms is used. So later on, as we progress to our discussion, we will discuss the new forms being implemented in the 6th edition MOP. Okay. Rule, another procedure on recording is do not leave any blanks. Indicate NA if not applicable to patient or patient is ineligible. Okay? And then ND for not done if patient is eligible but activity was not done. For example, if your patient is a child and then DSSM or gene expert was not done because that's the child cannot. So instead of leaving the portion on the diagnostic result blank, just write the initials ND for not done or none or if nothing. And U and K unknown by the health staff or patient accordingly. Or usually, itong A and K, pag the patient couldn't remember any information about TB, history of TB, no treatment, whether he or she had that before, or anything that is unknown to the patient, let's say, for example, ang birthday, especially for those elderly, yung mga seniors na hindi na nila ma-remember ang birthday nila. So, instead of leaving it blank, for example, hindi nila ma-remember ang birthday nila, instead of leaving it blank, just put unknown or. And then, another procedure is, the IT serves as the official TB register and records. We are slowly shifting to the paperless recording and reporting. So, while we are in transition, it is still recommended that in the health facilities, you still retain a paper-based recording. Especially for those areas na mahina yung signal, wala or intermittent yung internet signal. So, mahirap kung mag-jump tayo agad from a paper-based to a paperless recording and reporting. Okay. So, on standard recording, ganito po yung ginagawa natin. For the name, surname, ang una natin nire-write mo under the name of the patient. So, first, surname first in capital letters, followed by the given name and name extensions, and then middle name. For example, in capital form, De La Cruz, Juan Julio Santos. Di pa rin po nagbago on way of writing the name of the patient mo. Po yung pina-follow natin from the last MOP to this current MOP. And for the sex, just write M or F, and then DOT, you can write 3 letters, initial of treatment supporter or healthcare workers. In recording the daily intake of the patient, initial of the treatment supporter or healthcare worker. In recording drugs not taken or absent or missed, we put X, and then I for incomplete regimen, H for drug holiday. Usually may drug holiday tayo in PMDT, no? Management of drug-resistant TB cases. Put hold for if the treatment or medication was put on hold, and then re-challenge. You write the challenge for drug re-challenge, and then circle date of regimen change, including shift to CP, double slash for shift to CP. Yung CP po is continuation phase. So, for the contact number, include area code and country code if outside the country. So, importante po meron tayong area codes for contact numbers pag telephone ang binigay. But usually naman, contact number na binibigay is cellphone number. No? But for cases na telephone number ang binigay, please ensure that the area code is also recorded for the purpose of if ever na-refer ang patient sa labas, na other areas, so the other area needs to call the patient, no, to contact the patient, at least hindi na sila mahihirapan to call the patient sa telephone kasi mayroon ng area code. And then for the date, we start with month, and then day, and then year. So in recording expert MTB RIF result, no, yung expert result, we just use the initial. So as a review, we just use the letter T, the RR, the TI, the N, and the I. So let's review. Yung T stands for MTB detected, rifampicin resistance not detected. So drug susceptible pa ang patient, no? The patient has TB, but hindi po resistance. So ang i-record natin na initial is letter T in red ink. Another result is RR. These are for patients with MTB detected and rifampicin resistance detected. So instead of writing the long interpretation na MTB detected, rifampicin resistance not detected, we just write the initial RR in red ink. Another abbreviation is TI. This stands for MTB detected, rifampicin resistance indeterminate. We also record it in red ink. For expert result, TB not detected, the initial we use is N in black ink because negative ang result, and then I for invalid or no result, or if the result is error in black ink. Okay? Bilang result naman po, the po is negative, the letter that you will record is N in black ink. It means that MTB not detected, the sample did not fluoresce under the UV light. For intermediate, and for indeterminate rather, the notation would be letter I. Interpretation of this is that the interpretation of this is that sample with incomplete fluorescence as compared to the positive control. This should be repeated using the same sample. If the second test is still the same, release the result as indeterminate. Parang same lang po siya sa GeneXpert, no? If the first result is indeterminate or error, we repeat the test, and then whatever the result of the second test, yun na po yung magiging official result niya. So for standard recording for LPA, the field is M tuberculosis complex result If the result is MTB detected, the notation would be MTB in red. If detected, the notation would be 0. And if the result is invalid, the notation or the recording should be I. For first line LPA and second line LPA, if the result is resistance, the letter that you will record is letter R in red ink. And then for resistance detected, the initial or the letter that you will record is letter S. That would be in black ink. For resistance indeterminate, it would be letter I and not applicable NA, both in black ink. Okay. Another policy in recording and reporting, confidentiality of patient records shall be observed at all times to protect the privacy of the patients as per RA 10173 or the Data Privacy Act of 2012. Only those who have direct involvement in the management and treatment of the patient should have access to the patient records. So how do we collect patient information? Letter A. Upon screening and start of treatment, inform the patient that sensitive personal information will be collected. Alam ng patient na this information is needed for patient's record, no? From screening to treatment, even up to the post-treatment follow-up. This information will only be used for the following purposes. Case management, so for proper diagnosis, treatment and adverse event management, and follow-up if lost any diagnosis and treatment. It can also be used for program management, let's say surveillance of TB cases nationwide, management of commodities and logistics report. So we need to have this personal information of the patients, no, in doing analyzing the TB trend in the Philippines, no, mga important mga that would help the program in doing planning and then strategizing kung ano ba yung mga good practices, ano pa na we could implement to further improve the program. So ano pa yung mga gaps na na-encounter for the betterment of the program, no, na kailangan solusyonan. And then this data can also be used for the provision of psychosocial and financial support, enablers, and other assistance. Patients should also be informed if information will be used for other purposes, such as which are not mentioned above, no? For example, research purposes. So we have to get the consent of the patients. For patients less than 18 years old, no, or yung mga minor, and for patients who are mentally incapacitated, or for those who cannot make their own decision, discuss it with any of the following. Okay, with the immediate relatives within the third degree of consanguinity on hierarchy, provided that in case of minors, either parents may be provided unless not married, in which case preference shall be given to mother. For partner, for a minimum of 1 year, for actual and identified guardian of the patient or the social worker. So sila po yung pwedeng designated persons na pwedeng kausapin or kolektahan ng information if the patients are minors or may mental incapacity, those who are mentally incapacitated or those who cannot decide on their own. Assure the patient that collected information will be treated with confidentiality. You should always ensure the patient that all their data, no, are confidential.
and shared only with authorized personnel such as but not limited to other health workers involved in the patient's TB care. For example, medical technologists and BHWs. This aside from the doctors, nurses who are managing the patient. No? And then records will be kept. Mention to the patient policies of the facility to ensure that information is secure, such as but not limited to. Because we know that our patients, we should always reassure the patient on data privacy. So records will be kept in a secure area only accessible by authorized personnel. Patients' names in some records will be coded using the TB or TPT case number to conceal identity. In addition, inform the patient his or her on data privacy as per RA 10173 or the Data Privacy Act of 2012. These rights are also listed in health education materials. So ano ba tong patient's right mo? Okay. This involves the right to be informed, the right to access, the right to object, the right to erasure or blocking, the right to file a complaint, the right to rectify, the right to data portability. Okay. All NTP paper-based records shall be kept for 7 years before properly being discarded. Why 7 years po? No? In doing data analysis, no, we have to do a trending of cases. So that's why data are being kept 7 years kasi we need at least 5-year data trend in doing our data analysis to help improve the implementation of the program. While if paper-based records are kept for 7 years, electronic records, on the other hand, shall be archived after 20 years of outcome. So, hanggang 20 years po yung pag-keep ng archiving of electronic records. Longer siya than the paper-based. Kasi mas while hindi pa po siya pwedeng i-dispose, kailangan po handle with care po and properly file or keep their paper records po na hindi sila masira while they are being kept for 7 years. So how do we store patients' record? So, no, first, store paper-based patient records and office-issued devices storing patients' data in a safe, lockable place, protected from external and internal deterioration. Preferable storage are elevated or hanging cabinets with lock. Keep them in a secure space away from unauthorized personnel and risk of fire or water. Also to include risk of being eaten by termites. Kasi minsan po pag ang storage natin is made of wood, hindi natin namamalayan baka meron na pong mga termites. So we should also look at that. No? Ensure also that proper filing of all forms, whether chronologically or alphabetically as appropriate. So, depende po sa nag-keep ng file. So, kung i-arrange na yung files in chronological order, alphabetical. People would prefer to arrange chronologically kung kailan nag-start ang treatment ng patient. Some would prefer if the data arranged as alphabetically for easier tracking kung if i-base siya sa first letter of the surname. Me personally, mas gusto ko siya alphabetically arranged. Dali ko siyang mahanap. Okay? Another way of storing the patient's record, policy on that, no? Avoid bringing patient records and office-issued devices with stored patient information outside the official work premises. This is to avoid na misplace or ma-damage ang records, as well as for the protection of the patient's privacy. No? Baka hindi natin malayan, baka may ibang maka-access ng mga data ng patient pag naiwan natin kung saan-saan lang ang paper-based or devices na containing patient's information. So it is really a no-no to take out patients' records from the health facility. So if you have observed in our previous monitorings, no, we would ask for your records, no, kung the availability of patients' records na nanda sa facility lang. We have noted in some areas na yung mga TB registers, wala po facility, wala sa health centers kasi nauwi yung nurse o yung medtech or yung midwife in charge for reasons na sometimes for updating of records, wala naubusan ng time sa facility, iko-continue sa bahay. So in as much as possible, we encourage that no patient records shall be taken out of the facility. If unavoidable naman, kung kinakailangan talaga ilabas ang patient records sa health facility, no, it is very important na logbook, no? Logbook of patient records brought outside the health facility. So the information in this logbook should contain when the record was borrowed, the date it was borrowed, responsible person, what kind of patient record was borrowed, and then the reason for bringing the record outside the health facility, and then the signature of the person responsible. It should also contain date when the record was returned, the status of the record upon return, kung ayos pa ba siya or napunit na ba siya, nabasa or anything. Basta yung status of the record upon return, and then signature of the person responsible when the record was returned. Okay. For logbook of office-issued devices naman brought outside the facility health records, it should contain date when it was borrowed, yung mga devices po, let's say laptop or tablet, basta issued ng facility for the purpose of recording and reporting. And then device identification and the reason for bringing out the device, same lang po doon sa taas sa paper-based. So, signature of the responsible person, the date when it was returned, the status of device upon return, and the signature of the person who borrowed it. In case that records are needed to be transferred, document in a logbook and then continuously monitor the delivery or office. When sending patients' records, envelope or opaque paper covering, basta ensure po na the record is properly sealed when transporting or sending the records to avoid po na and then transferring of patients' records is discouraged outside official working hours. In transferring records, the facility should also maintain a logbook of transferred patients' records. So, the information that a logbook should contain includes when the data was sent, who is the responsible person, what kind of patient record. Should also contain the reason why the record needs to be transferred, and then means of transmittal, kung ito ba ay pina-hand carry through a liaison officer, or was this mailed through a courier, or whatever means of transmittal. And then, receiving person and office, sino po yung intended na makareceive ng reports, and then the signature of the responsible person po. In copying naman records in any form other than those mentioned in this MOP is allowed if approved by head of facility, supervisor, and with valid reason or purpose, such as, for example, backup records and decentralization. So, siyempre, we need to also have backup records in cases na for emergency purposes lang po. For example, we are implementing the paperless recording and reporting, no, nagko-computer tayo. So, it is important na binabackup natin ang mga records natin in the event na biglang mag-back down or masira yung laptop or yung tablet na ginagamit. At least po, hindi po mawawala lahat ng records dahil meron po tayong backup. And for decentralization, no, sa pag-transfer of patient management, no, from the treatment facility sa mga IDOTS facilities natin. So, pwede pong i-copy ang record. So, records should be maintained in the PNDT as well as records doon sa IDOTS. For the use of personal devices, work health data information is discouraged. So, kailangan po, it is highly encouraged that official devices lang, official work-issued devices po ang gamitin natin in handling work health, kasi we would want nga talaga to ensure data privacy. If unavoidable talaga, no, example, walang laptop or desktop sa health facility, for example, or nasira, and then reporting time na po, or the health personnel in charge needs to update the records of the patient, that's the only time na pwedeng gamitin ang personal devices ng staff, provided that nilalag po yung authorized health worker who use their own device for work. So, in the logbook of health facility personnel using personal devices, kailangan po, meron ito po. The following health facility personnel whose names and signature appear below are allowed to use their personal devices, such as laptops and smartphones, to fulfill their job responsibility. Or the following health personnel agree that it is the responsibility of the owner to protect the privacy of patient and confidentiality of the health information. Also, the following health facility personnel also agree that in case the owner failed to uphold the privacy of any confidentiality of health information, he or she will be subject to disciplinary action, including potentially termination of his or her employment. So, if we are being entrusted with the information of the patients, we should always ensure that patient privacy is ensured at all times, no? Kasi pwede pong makasuhan ang staff o yung personnel in charge when proven na siya ang reason leak ang information ng patient. So, we would want to avoid that to happen. And then the following health facility personnel also agree to delete stored patient information upon resignation or termination of employment or assignment of clinic. So, in the logbook, dapat merong naka-record yung owner ng device, personal device, and then personal device identification. So, ano yung device, no? Yung model and your serial number. And then the signature of the owner of the device. And then the name of immediate supervisor as a witness and the signature of the supervisor. So, in everything that we do, kailangan recorded po talaga lahat. So, if in the event of lost patient records, including devices storing patient information, for example, nagkaroon ng break-in, nanakaw ang mga laptop or desktop, no, immediately submit an incident report to the supervisor, who in turn will escalate the report to proper channels. Kasi minsan po wala naman po tayong, it's beyond our control. For example, nanakaw ang device, no? So, kailangan po siya i-report immediately. Taking corrective measures to avoid any similar incident in the future. Okay. Another policy in storing of patient records include ITs serves as the backup tool for data and record recovery in case of catastrophic events such as fire, flood, or other natural disaster happens. No, that's why it always being encouraged that updating of ITs records should be done daily. Should be on a real-time basis, which is daily. So, kung may mga bagong cases, kung as much as possible kung pwede, i-update na po siya agad. Kasi kung ang ITs po kasi natin, ang server niya, meron po kasi to siyang back talaga. So, kung locally, in your own facility, let's say, for example, sa RHU or sa hospital dots, nawala or nasira ang device or nasunog ang facility, God forbid, meron tayong ITs na saan po natin ma-recover ang mga patient's information. That's why important to always regulate ITs, and then wag na po mag-antay pag during deadline na of submission of report, saka pa siya i-update dahil as we all know, naghihina po ang IT system natin pag masyadong maraming gumagamit, at especially during deadline na of submission of report, masyadong maraming gumagamit na baka hindi po natin ma-update agad yung mga record, yung patient information. So, as much as possible, update ITs regularly. Another guidelines include report to the facility head in writing any unlawful violation on patient's privacy within 24 hours upon discovery. I-report natin, wag po tayong matakot kung meron pong nangyaring ganito. No? Provide NTP Management Office, the Central Office, a courtesy copy of this written report para ganitong nangyari po. Okay. So, in archiving naman of records, patients, so, ito na po yung mga records ng mga patients who have successfully completed the treatment, or even those who were not able to complete the treatment, biglang nawala, but still we keep their records ilan na, how many years na po yung hard paper based, so 7 years yung record pag-archive ng paper-based records. Archiving is the process of transferring data or records in a less frequently used storage area in order to simplify the case of future needs. So, ang magiging question na lang po dito is availability of storage space. So, for every facility, just ensure you have a safe place kung saan pwede is mga records ng mga patients who na hindi na siya gagamitin. Yun nga, for example, yung mga natapos na treatment mo. So, i-store lang po siya, like, for example, yung cabinet. Just ensure na hindi po masisira ang records while hindi pa siya time para i-dispose. So, what should we do in archiving patients' records? If storage space is available at the facility, archive all paper-based records that are dormant or inactive for 5 years in a separate storage block. If storage space is unavailable, place the records in the municipal or city archives. So, kasi every LGU meron po talaga yan siyang archives. So, kung walang available sa health center, walang available space, pwede po doon siya i-archive. Just ensure na it is properly stored din, and then yung access hindi basta sino lang ang maka-access, because to ensure the privacy of patient information. And then we should also records can also be scanned and stored electronically to save space. So make the storage device password protected. So kung talagang space sa facility or sa municipal or city archives, so pwede naman din siya i-scan and then i-save electronically sa mga USB, sa desktop ba, or sa cloud. Just ensure na password protected po siya para kung sino man maka-access, maka-encounter ng scanned document na wala namang kinalaman sa management ng ng patients no, o sino man wala siyang direct involvement sa program, na ma-open ang patient's record. Archive electronic records in ITs 20 years after the end of the most recent TB treatment episode. After 2 years in archive, stored records, how do we, for disposal naman po, after 2 years in archive, discard records. And then, how do we dispose it? So, shredding is considered as the best method of disposing confidential documents. So, for those meron mga paper shredder, so ipipid lang nila sa machine at magpusa na siyang mag-isa na So, kung yung mga sa walang mga paper shredder machine, punitin po before i-dispose ng confidential record. When disposing patient records, documents, records being disposed in a logbook. So, prior to disposing, i-record kung ano-ano po yung mga records na i-dispose. There should be a certificate. So, what does a disposal certificate contains? So, meron pong I hereby certify that the records listed below were disposed on. So, kailan po yung date the record was disposed. Okay. Ano-ano yung other information kailangan? The name of the health authority, the name of the staff, the contact number of the staff, the email address, the signature, and the date when the record was disposed. It should also contain the description of the records. For example, dinispose na yung after 7 years, dinispose. After 7 years na siyang archive, or 2 years na siya, after 2 years in the archive, mo pwede, example, yung treatment card of the patient. So, i-record yung sa description of records of treatment card, for example. Date active from date active to. So, kailan yung inclusive date na active ang record na yon. Okay. So, for the general procedures on reporting, number 7, the ITs shall be the official electronic TB information system. So, since 2015, as early as 2015, wala na po tayong paper-based reporting, no? Although we are still on paper-based recording, pati sa reporting po, through ITs na tayo. Since ITs is the official electronic TB records, so ano-ano po yung general procedures on ITs? Healthcare are capacitated in the utilization of ITs through attendance in formal trainings or coaching by a senior trained staff. Kasi ITs is a complicated, it's a complicated thing. If hindi po properly trained ang personnel na will be in charge sa ITs, sa encoding of patient's records sa ITs. So, kailangan mo na siyang matrain, or kung wala naman pong nakaschedule na formal ITs training, the trained senior staff can do the coaching to the other staff na i-assign for ITs encoding. Okay. And then assign at least one health staff as the ITs encoder. Ideally po, dapat iba si ITs encoder sa ITs validator para magkakaroon ng cross-checking of data accuracy. Usually, the head of the facility or the physician or the nurse coordinator is the IT's validator to ensure the accuracy and consistency of records and, and encoded data. Ito na po yung ginagawa natin usually sa pag may mga DQC tayo, no? So, we validate the accuracy and consistency of records and encoded data. But on the facility level, dapat meron na talagang different in charge for IT's encoder and IT's validator for cross-checking of the accuracy and consistency of paper-based records and electronic records. So, delegate tasks to another health staff if head or physician is not available to be the validator. So, usually it's the nurse or the medtech coordinator for the program. Okay. So, for those, for example, kung merong bagong DOT certificate facility or merong bagong staff assigned sa program, the request for an IT's user account for all IT's users should be submitted, should be accomplished using the service request form and then submitted to the IT's regional administrator. For staff na who will no longer be connected sa program, the IT's administrator should also remove the name of the personnel in the direct and the account assigned to that personnel who will no longer be involved in the program should also be deleted. Use the Cleanit service request form for other user account updates such as but not limited to the following. For example, change of IT's version from online to offline or offline to online. And then change of access level kasi yung access level of ITs varies depende sa level meron sa different hierarchy of accessibility. So, for example, ang DOH has iba yung access level niya. Meron pa tayong encoding lang yung pwede siyang maka-access. So, different accessing level po. Pero, is update of assignment or contact information, and then account activation in the current in the event of resignation, the assignment or retirement. So personnel who are already resigned or not in the facility or have been transferred to other program but have an IT's account must be requested for activation directly to Cadence. Okay, so this is to ensure na only those who are involved in the care of the patient have access to the first information of the patient. And then if for example, in the event naman din na nakalimutan si password mo, so just submit a service request form sa regional ITs in charge para ma-forward ko sa clinics for the resetting of the password. Kasi sometimes, no, unavoidable naman po. Sometimes nakalimutan ang mga passwords. Kasi ang i-request lang po is password reset. There is no need na to request for a new account. Okay. Another procedure is accomplish paper forms as necessary and or directly encode key information into the information required to be reported. So, ano ba po ito, no? Use the ITs to identify history and prior care of the patient and for real-time automated attendance checking during treatment. For health facilities implementing the IT's laboratory module, encode laboratory request forms prior to sending a specimen to laboratory, and then screening information, treatment cards, laboratory results, and update patient at least once a week and encode daily treatment and laboratory request real time. Validate cases and results in order to be counted in respective reports. So validator must be different from the encoder as mentioned earlier for validation of data consistency and correctness. Invalidated cases and results will not be counted in the report. That's why important talaga na the data encoded are correct and validated. How is it being done? The designated IT's case validator must validate the encoded data to be counted as official case in the report. Designated IT's laboratory validator must validate to be the automatically sent the requesting facility. So, itong procedure sa IT's, medyo hindi na po ito bago sa mga nag-i-implement na po ng IT's, no? We are implementing this naman po, no, regularly ating mga health kasi yung mga DOTS providing hospitals. Utilize ITs and maximize its features, no? Maganda po yung ating ITs, no, for all health programs ng DOH. Ang isang promising na program na merong magandang recording and reporting features is that ito na po yung sa program, no, yung ITs, kasi madali po tayo naka-generate ng result, nakaka-encode tayo online, so yun po. So, utilize ITs and maximize its features. Meron, since na-implement ang ITs, along the way, may mga improvements na ginawa, hanggang ngayon, tapos ngayon, it's evolving hanggang sa mas lalong mapaganda ang system, no? Ngayon, meron na po tayong TB notification, mandatory notification incorporated sa ITs, ang reporting ng drug receipts inventories, pwede na rin po sa ITs. Tapos, yung meron na rin po tayo online referral. So, in the event na RHU1 nag-refer sa RHU-B, so si RHU1 can notify the receiving RHU ITs na po in the event na, let's say, wala pong contact number si RHU1 ni RHU2, or in the event po na unsuccessful po yung referral, let's say, hindi pumunta si patient sa facility na kung saan siya i-refer. So, the referring facility can inform the receiving facility through ITs na po. Yun po ang isang feature, magandang feature po ng ITs, no? Use ITs for patient referrals, reporting admissions, transmittal of laboratory updating of healthcare workers, and facility contact information, as well as updating of stock inventory, creation of graphical representation of accomplishments. So, masyadong maraming magagandang features ang ITs po. And the program is so lucky na meron po tayong na-develop na online software for our recording and reporting. Okay. Ensure IT security is maintained. So, only those who are involved in the management of the cases in the recording and reporting may access to ITs. No? System will automatically log out once for 20 minutes. Para in the event na, for example, nag-encode si data encoder, tapos biglang na-busy siya, kailangan niyang may gawing other tasks, nakalimutan niya i-log out si ITs, no? The system itself has an auto log out pag hindi na po siya nagagamit for 20 minutes. Para wala pong sino unauthorized person na maka-access na data na hindi naman dapat. Reload the browser or relaunch IT's site to log in. Dormant account will be automatically deactivated after 6 months of no login. Send a request to KMIS using the SRF if the personnel opts to reactivate the account. Each IT's user is responsible to keep the account's authentication details private. Hence, sharing of account is not allowed. Okay. If the other staff does not have an account yet, submit a request to KMIS to avoid sharing of accounts because it is highly discouraged. Data naman po, it is done monthly to ensure the completeness and accuracy of the data in ITs. So, correct data cleaning findings in the ITs and feedback to Excel feedback to KMIS to the regional coordinator. So, familiar to na ang ating mga ITs PAs, no? Every quarter, meron yan every month or sometimes every quarter, meron niyang nare-receive na notice for data cleaning because sometimes yung mga may nami-miss out na information, completeness ng information, and accuracy of the data encoded in that's 5C. Ating ITSPA is regularly na-monitor din ng mga na-encode ng mga facilities mo. It is also advised and encouraged that our health facilities should always ensure that all the data that they encode sa ITs are correct and up to date. Kasi po, forever, nandyan po ang ITs, mga ITs PAs natin. Yung kanilang engagement sa program is practice po. So, once po mag-end na po yung foreign grant na nag-employ sa kanila, na mawawala na din po tayo yung ITs PA sa kada region, no? O sa kada city. So, before pa po yung mangyari, the facility should practice na on their own to regularly update and validate their IT's information, that the data encoded in their IT's accounts are correct, no, and complete. They should be able to do the data quality check on their own level, no? Sa level pala ng facility, dapat internally nakakita sila ng data quality check. In addition, IT's e-manual is also available for further details. So, coordinate with any problem occurs. So, the e-manual can be found on the upper right side of the IT's page. So, yung website po, ito po is flash po sa screen. It's https://its.tbsp.org.ph/its_manual.php. So, another policy on recording and reporting, all entity reports shall be submitted to DOH through ITs following the prescribed timeline. Feedback on the submitted report shall be provided following the prescribed flow and timeline. The physician or immediate supervisor is responsible in ensuring consistency of reports submitted. Generate monthly and official reports to monitor progress that can be discussed during monthly staff meeting. So, every quarter yung after every quarter, the facility is given another month to complete and the updating of the records to be submitted for the report generation for that certain quarter. So, kasi once nag-close na po yung encoding for the certain quarter, close na po kasi yun. So, if you would request for reopening, sa central pa po sinesend ang inyong request letter because at the regional level, wala pong capability ang regional offices ng Center for Health Development to unlock po ang IT. Ito. Kaya po binibigyan ng 1-month allowance po to every quarter to complete the patient information, the recording and reporting of patient information. So, enough na po yung 1 month and then let's avoid na lang po cramming po sa pag-encode ng mga patient's information, yung mga last minute encoding kasi dito na po yung high yung chances na mangyari na mali-mali yung na-encode or kulang yung mga information na madali po. So, it is still being advised and highly encouraged that updating or encoding of patients' information be done on a daily basis, on a real-time basis, or on a weekly basis. So, ano-ano po ba yung mga reports na sinasubmit? So, we have 9 reports. So, ano-ano po mga reports? So, report 1 is the quarterly report on expert MTB reef or smear microscopy and TB lump. So, these are 3 different tests being done, no? Na incorporated na po siya sa iisang report. Okay. And then we also have the report 1B, the quarterly report on 9-probe assay. We also have report 1C, quarterly report on TB culture, and report 1D, quarterly report on drug susceptibility testing. So they are being reported Q1 per the current year. So for example, ang quarter being reported is um, quarter 1 of the current year. So kung ano, itong ang A, B, C, and D, current year po ang nire-report. Submission, for example, ang Q1 the current year i-report, no, ang deadline of submission is April 30. So, and 1 to March 31 ang reporting. Ang deadline of submission is the last day of the following month of the quarter. So, validation deadline is April 30, for example. And then, for report 2, quarterly report on external quality assessment for TB smear microscopy, same din po sa report 1, no? Sinasubmit po siya. Dapat masubmit na po siya within a month after the quarter being reported. So, for example, ang report is third quarter, no? At, like, sir, ang report deadline ng third quarter report would be October 31, last day of the following month. As well as report 3, yung quarterly report on TB and TB preventive notification and treatment. So, ang cohort reported is the quarter of the current year. Pero for previous year for enrollment status, HIV or DM, so yung previous quarter po yung cohort reported. A, yung monthly report on FLD smear microscopy and for invent. Monthly report on current year. For example, ang cohort being reported is March of the current year. Yung deadline of submission niya is April 10 days after the month it is being reported. Okay. For report 5, quarter report on TB and TB preventive treatment outcomes. So, quarter previous year for DSTB, TPT, and DRTB interim, and then quarter of 2 years ago for DRTB, and quarter of 3 years ago for DRTB post-treatment. Yan po yung cohort report for this specific report. So reports 1 hanggang report 8, it is being reported on the current year, while report 9 of the previous year or years po, depende po kung ano specific ang hinahanap po. Okay. Additional policies on recording and reporting includes on-site and off-site data quality check activities shall be done like at the facility or the municipal or city level, province or city or regional or national level. Okay. And then na po, sa schedule ng kada facility or kada city or kada region or kailan po nila sa schedule yung DQC. It is recommended, it is highly encouraged that every quarter, the facility nagko-conduct po ng at least every quarter, meron pong kinoconduct na data quality check. Sure, correctness, completeness, accuracy of the data. Data collected shall allow for a calculation of the minimum program effort. The month or quarter being reported, validate completeness, accuracy, and consistency of IT records. So in completeness, kailangan i-ensure that all required and due field are recorded in the TB register and encoded and updated in IPs. kailangan kompleto po. So, how is it being done? So, review all generate patient lists from ITs. Review all key fields are completely filled out. Instead of blanks, lagyan po ng NA or ND or none or 0 or A recorded accordingly. Kung wala data for that specific data na hiningi. For accuracy naman, ensure that patients are classified according to prescribed definition, no? If sa completeness is yung all patient information are it, sa accuracy naman, it ensures the classification of the patient should be in accordance with the prescribed definition sa ating NOP. So, TB bacteriologic status, verify if bacteriologic confirmed cases have positive TB smear microscopy, expert MTB relief, or TB culture. So, if ni-record po as BC, make sure that the laboratory results of the expert or the DSSM or TB culture or TB lab is available po. Kailangan po nire-record din ng results in order for the BC record to be accurate. So, kung wala po yun, kailangan po siya i-record. No? Hanapin po yung kung the result the laboratory was failed to be recorded, so hanapin po yung result at i-record sa TB register. And for DRTB bacteriological status, verify DRTB classification is aligned with DST and expert MTB results. And for the registration group naman po, verify assigned registration group is aligned with the history of treatment. Example po, na ilagay na record ang patient as new, pero yung history pa hindi mo siya before. So, mali po yung, hindi po accurate ang pag-record sa registration group. So, mga ganun. So, kailangan pong binavalidate po yun. And for treatment outcome din, verify outcomes by reviewing bacteriological status and sputum follow-up. For consistency naman between records and IT state data, ensure that source documents are consistent with encoded data in ITs. That is why it is very important before tayo mag-encode sa ITs, yung ating paper-based document is updated. So, ano po yung kailangan nating NTP form or record na ginagamit natin? Ito po yung drug susceptible DSTB and DRTB registers, yung laboratory registers, yun po, kailangan po yun laging updated kasi kumbaga yun yung Bible and that cards of the patient, no, kailangan consistently updated yung records kasi kulang lang po ng isang information doon, magiging kulang din po yung information na i-encode natin sa IPs. So tayo, kung sino yung mag-e-encode, mahihirapan siya to fill in the blanks if yung source document niya, source paper-based document niya is kulang-kulang din. So yun po yung mga nangyayari na incomplete or may inaccuracy of data sa IPs. Kung yung paper-based mismo na document is kulang-kulang din at hindi updated. Okay. And for consistency between records and IT's report, ensure that counts from source document or are consistent with reports generated by ITs. So, once na-encode na po lahat ng cases na mag-generate report, the personnel, the staff should ensure that yung total cases sa paper-based at yung total cases ng report generated sa ITs is parehas po. Otherwise, kung hindi siya magkaparehas, i-review kung saan po nagkulang ang sa pag-encode or kung nagsobra ba ang encoding as compared sa records na paper. If with corrections, update is until correct report is generated. Once validated by assigned healthcare provider and checked by physician or immediate supervisor, click Submit button in ITs. Await review of PHO or CHO and CHT. The PHO and CHO and CHE are to check completeness, accuracy, and consistency as well. If with corrections, feedback is to be given through proper channels. Once validated, PHO or CHO and CHD clicks reviewed button ng ITs para maka-generate na po ng official report. So in doing data quality activities, we have on-site and off-site. Okay. For on-site, ang nangyari po sa on-site data validation is self-validation. Yung facility na-validate nila ang kanilang sarili in terms of their records, in terms of completeness and consistency of records. And then, may nangyari ding monitoring visits, on-site monitoring visits, and routine data quality assessment. For off-site naman, merong desk review, decentralized data quality check, and data cleaning by units. So, ang on-site usually happens sa facility itself, sa city, or sa province, or sa regional level. While yung off-site po, sa central po, sila po din on their level, nagkagawa din po sila ng data quality activities to ensure na yung ating mga data are correct, complete, consistent, and updated. Okay, securely store a hard copy of the final and validated report for easy retrieval in the absence of IT's access. So, once meron na po naka-generate na ng quarterly report, validated na yung quarterly report at na-generate na, ensure to print a copy, Kasi sometimes, hindi natin maiwasan, biglang sa intermittent o walang signal, biglang down na naman sa PLDT, which is usually nangyayari, or mahina ang signal because, let's say, masama ang panahon. So, tapos biglang kinailangan ng data. So, meron tayong agad-agad na data available because we already have a printed out copy. If already overdue, send a letter requesting for reopening of submission of report to the PHO or CHO who in turn will escalate the report to proper channels. Indicate in the letter the reason for delayed submission. Although there are may mga times na po tayo nakapag-request na tayo to reopen because of certain valid reasons, pero as much as possible, let's avoid na having to request na to reopen yung IPs kasi central office already gives a 1-month allowance after the quarter to be reported para ma-comply lang yung pag-complete ng data. So, and if regularly lang po na-update yung pag-entities daily or on weekly basis, there would be no need to request for reopening once na-close na po si IT's reporting for that quarter. The entity shall release official data annually based on the key program indicators. So, kung ano lang po yung data na na-end ng mga DOTS facilities, DOTS providing facilities sa ITs, yun lang po yung report na ma-generate ng entity as to be the official report ng kada facility or kada city or province or regional level po. So, kung may mga cases po na hindi na-encode, sayang po. Sayang po yung accomplishment pag hindi po na-account. So, it is very important to regularly update the ITs and voting. Performance on screening, testing and diagnosis, treatment, and TB preventive treatment requires be available to the public via a dashboard. Pero yung specific names and details of the patient po, hindi po siya available. Ini-ensure po na hindi po wala access po ang general public doon. Request for other data through a formal letter to the facility, LGU, CHT, or entity stating the intended use for the data and means of securing them. So, hindi basta-basta nag-release ng data sa other people who have no direct involvement sa management of